In today's video, we are going to learn about how you can actually draw graph of sine x, cosine x, and tangent x, followed by how you can actually draw the graph for trigonometric functions with transformation. For example, sine 2x, how are you going to draw it, and also negative cosine x, how you can draw it. So stay tuned to the end of the video where I will show you many of the examples. So let's start. So let's say if you want to draw, first we want to know the basic on how you can actually draw sine x. So y equal to sine x. So first thing, you draw out the axis, x-axis and y-axis. Then some of the key data point for x-axis is 0, pi and 2 pi. So x-axis is in radian. So if you want to know how you can actually convert degree to radian, you can check out my other videos on the conversion. So basically 2 pi is actually 360 degree. So sine x looks like this. It's a S graph. Next, we also need to understand how you can draw cosine x. For cosine x, similarly, we first draw out the x-axis and y-axis. And the key data point here is also the same. We draw out 0, pi and 2 pi. So we also need to know that the y value for sine axis maximum is 1. Similarly to x-axis, similarly to the minimum value is -1. So now we have cosine x. So the maximum value is also 1 and minimum value is also -1. So we draw the graph starting from 0. Then it's a U graph and ends at 2 pi. So you can press your calculator and input y equal to cos 0. You will actually get the answer 1. And you can also do it for the same for y cos pi. You will get -1. Make sure that your calculator is in radian mode, radian instead of degree. So let's try to draw tangent x. Now let's say we have tangent x. The key data point here is we first need to draw out the y-axis and x-axis, and we split it into pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2 and 2 pi. Basically pi over 2 radian is equal to 90 degree. Pi radian is equal to 180 degree. And 3 pi over 2 is equal to 270 degree. And 2 pi is 360 degree. So for each interval for tangent, you need to remember how it looks like. For instance, let's say we have tangent 0 is actually 0. So we start from 0 and draw all the way up. And we know that tangent pi is actually 0 also. So we have this, and it will never touch pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2 because the answer is undefined. If you press your calculator, you will realize that tangent pi over 2 and tangent 3 pi over 2 is actually undefined. And finally, we have tangent 2 pi, which also gives you the value of 0. So you draw like this. So this is the graph of the tangent x. So now let's try some of the examples of the trigonometry functions with transformations. So let's start off with some of the examples that we have, so y equal to 2 multiply with sine x, let's say. So just now we discussed that sine x actually looks like this. So we have sine x with the graph of x, and here is 2 pi, here is pi, here is 0, and we know that just now the maximum value is 1. So now when you multiply with 2, you will get the maximum value equal to 2. Similarly, just now we know that the minimum value for the graph is -1. Now we multiply 2, we will get -2. So let's try one more example with cosine. So let's say we have y3 cosine x. So just now we draw the graph for cosine, it looks like this. So we have x-axis and y-axis, and we have 0, we have 2 pi, we have pi. So the graph looks like a U, and just now we know that the maximum value is actually 1. Now we multiply by 3, so the value of the graph maximum value is 3, and the minimum value just now we know is -1. So now multiply with 3, you will get -3. So this is how you can actually draw a cosine graph. So let's try some examples on how you can actually do for negative functions. So let's say we have y equal to negative sine x. So now before we draw the actual graph for this, we can draw out the sine x graph first. So let's say we have 0, we have 2 pi. So sine x graph looks like this. Then now we have a negative sign, so which means that we flip. The positive value will become the negative value. So the actual graph looks like this. The actual graph looks like a reflection on the x-axis. So let's try one more example for y equal to -2 cosine x. So for example, now we draw out the original graph for cosine first. So for cosine, just now we already draw out, it looks like this. So we have, this is our cosine graph. So let's say we multiply by 2, so our maximum value is 2. Our maximum value is -2. However, since now we have a negative here, we have a negative value, so our graph need to be flipped. So it will become positive value will become negative, negative value will become positive. So it's a direct reflection on the x-axis. So let's try some more examples. So now let's say if we have y equal to sine x plus 3. So similarly, we draw out the original graph first. We know that sine x looks like an S-curve. Then we have a +3 here, means that we shift the entire curve, because this is all the value +3. So we shift the entire curve up by 3. So 0 become 3 as starting point. Let's say here is 3. So the entire graph will be shift up by 3, and you will get a new graph like this. So you will have, let's say this is value 3, you will get the graph looks like this, where this is the pi, this is 2 pi, and all other being the same. And the maximum value for this graph is 3 plus the original maximum value for sine x, which is 1, so is 4. And the minimum value for this graph is, the minimum value of the sine x is -1. -1 plus 3 is 2. So this is the graph for the y equal to 3 sine x plus 3. So let's try one more example of y equal to cosine x plus 2. So our first step is to make sure that we know how to draw cosine. So 0, pi and 2 pi. So let's say we have cosine means that, let's say now we draw out the u curve, then we have pi here, and the maximum value we mentioned just now is 1 and -1. So now since we plus 2 means that the whole graph shifted up by 2. So let's say we plus 2, so the maximum value now will become 3 and the minimum value will become 1. So we have the entire graph shifted up by 2. So we will draw. So for the pi value, initially the value is -1. So now become, after plus 2 become 1. The value for cos 2 pi initially is 1. So now the value become 3. Similarly for cos 0, initially the value is 1. So now plus 2 becomes 3. So we will have a U curve like this. So basically its entire graph shifted up by 2. So now let's try 2 more examples. So now let's say we have y equal to sine half x. So now we apply some numbers to the angle in the trigonometric functions. To draw this kind of graph, we need to write down table of values. So for example, now we draw out, let's say we want to draw 0 at the point of 0, pi, 2 pi, 3 pi and 4 pi. So you plug in the number into the functions. So sine 0 is actually 0. You press your calculator. Sine pi, you plug in is sine half pi. Sine half pi is 1. And sine y equal to sine, we plug in the number, sine 2 pi is actually sine pi. So the value of sine pi is 0. So this one is 0. So let's try with other example. Y equal to sine 3 pi over 2. We plug in the equations. We will get -1. And finally, let's say we plug into the equation y equal to 4 pi over 2. We will get sine 2 pi, which is 0. So with this data point, we can draw out the graph of sine half x. So we plug in the number pi, 2 pi, 3 pi and 4 pi. So 0, 0, 0, 1. So we will have 0, 0, pi 1, 2 pi 0 and 3 pi -1 and 4 pi 0. So we can draw the graph like this. Let's try another example for cosine. So now let's say we have y equal to cosine half x. So similarly, we draw out the table and take out our calculators. So let's say we have 0, we will get cos 0, it will be 1. Cosine half x, let's say is 2 pi. We will get cos pi, which is -1. Y cos half 4 pi, we will get cos 2 pi, we will get 1. So the answer will be 2 pi, 4 pi, negative 1, 1. So with this data point, we can start to draw x, y, 0. So 0, 1, this is the first data point, and 2 pi, negative 1, this is the second data point, and 4 pi, we will get 1 as the answer. So we will have a U curve. So I hope you have learned about how you can actually draw different type of trigonometric functions and their respective transformations. And if you want to learn more about other trigonometric topics and other mathematics topics, you can check out my playlist and subscribe to follow more mathematics videos. Thank you.